Alright, so in my Malignant review, you all suggested that I do a James Wan Tier List, and honestly, he's one of my favorite directors in the horror genre, and one of my favorites in general. Let's talk about him. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. James Wan, every time he tackles a different genre, feels like I'm constantly impressed. And while I don't love all of his films, I truly don't think the guy has made a terrible movie. Now, you may disagree, and I'll be honest with you, just up front. This tier list is not going to go the way you think. I have some varying opinions on James Wan. Some of his movies that others haven't responded to, I've thoroughly enjoyed. So today we're going to talk about it. I'm going to try to explain myself, and I need you guys in the comments down below. That's the most important part, the discussion. What is your favorite and least favorite James Wan movie? Were you a fan of Malignant? This is all in honor of that. We're going to talk about it, and then at the end, rank them in order. Let's get right into it and start with the scary stuff. At least one of the scary franchises. That first Insidious movie, Tiptoe. I can't sing. Obviously, Patrick Wilson, he's incredible. We'll start with the imagery as well, and that's one thing you need in a good horror movie like that, something as sinister as the concept of Insidious. What he does so well, James Wan, is he works in the paranormal world in a way that just feels separated from other big blockbuster-esque horror movies, and that's what the Insidious movies and the Conjuring movies fall in my opinion. They feel like conventional horror on their surface, but because James Wan is so fantastic at constructing these movies, they always get deeper than that. And this concept of this young boy, he's trapped in this comatose state and in this realm called the Further with that evil spirit, and it's up to our parents, Rose Byrne and Patrick Wilson. Also, Ty Simpkins, I believe, starred as the young boy, one of his first roles. This movie is so scary in somewhat of a generic way, but it also just knocks it out of the park with its visuals. It's like the pre-Conjuring, and I'm going to throw the first Insidious on the great tier. I truly believe this is a great horror movie, and one that audiences really responded to. Next up, it is Insidious Chapter 2. We're back with our family. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Lin Shaye as well in the first two movies. She is absolutely spectacular, but this time around, they believe they have defeated these spirits that haunted their family, but they soon discover that the spirits, well, they're not gone. And this movie, while interesting enough, it doesn't have the punch that the first movie packed. The imagery is still there. The horror is still there. A couple of the jump scares, just comparing it to the first, didn't land quite as well. And horror movies often do this, or franchises, right? They start to lose their magic the more they go. And we pretty much see that with most major horror franchises, to the point to where eventually they're like coming out on DVD instead of in theaters. Right now, Insidious hasn't gotten there yet, and I believe we're scheduled to get another movie not directed by James Wan, so we're just going to have to see how that goes. But as of now, I'm going to throw this sequel on the okay tier. I think it's an okay movie, right? I got enough out of it to say I enjoyed it, but it's not even close to the level of the first one. But I would say it's better than what some give it credit for. So next up is Dead Silence, and oh my goodness, I watched this movie way back when, and I didn't really remember it as thoroughly as I wanted to, so I went back, revisited it, and it's all about this young guy who returns to his hometown. He's looking for answers for his wife's murder, and he believes it's linked to this ghost of a deceased ventriloquist. And if you've seen this movie, you know exactly how it goes and how it progresses into that third act with one of the most wild James Wan-esque twists I've ever seen. It's crazy, it's wacky. Now, one thing I'll say about this film is it doesn't quite land as well as I remember, because what I remembered from this movie was that third act twist, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I still enjoyed this time around. But the execution of this film, the build-up, the lead-in to that third act, I wasn't really on board with it, to be honest with you. I wasn't with the characters like I needed to be. The progression of the story was just awkward at times, and some of it intentionally, absolutely, because Wan does that really well. We'll talk about that with Malignant. But the rest of it, I thought the execution was a little sloppy, which I'm rarely saying for James Wan. Again, really loved the way that it all culminates and comes together, and it shocked me. It truly did. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But even then, it also feels, and it's not technically early 2000s, but it kind of feels like that early 2000s-esque filmmaking. So didn't quite resonate with me. And I rarely say that about James Wan. So unfortunately, I'm going to put this on the meh tier. I still don't think it's a bad movie. And if you can see from this tier list, I don't think James Wan has a bad movie. But this is the one that just doesn't quite stick with me the way it intended. I remember this one coming out and just getting slayed by critics. This is Death Sentence, starring Kevin Bacon, John Goodman, Kelly Preston. I mean, it's a great cast, and it's a great concept. This guy is this really normal executive. He has this perfect life, and then one night he sees something that changes everything, and that turns him into this man who's going to do whatever it takes to protect his family. And I mean whatever it takes. It's a revenge thriller. That's what it is. And I never imagined seeing James Wan direct something like this. Well, now I don't imagine it, but back in the day, it was one of his first films. Now, it didn't quite work, right? I do think some of it's cliche. Some of it is pulling things from other movies that we've seen countless times. But Wan does enough, in my opinion, with his camera movements, with Bacon's performance, with some really interesting themes that we're exploring here, heartbreak within the movie, to where I can put this on the okay tier. Again, it doesn't go any further than that because we've seen this movie before, but I find it interesting that James Wan would even direct a movie like this, so that's pretty cool. Next up, how about Saw? And everybody knows how relevant and nostalgic Saw is for a lot of people, and many fans of this very intense genre, right? The genre of body horror and the most crazy, gruesome deaths and traps that you'll ever see. It's incredible. It really is. Now, the movie itself, I like the movie. I think it's good. I think I'm a little lower than a lot of people on the film because just some aspects of it, and I hate to say it like this, they don't necessarily hold up as well for me as they're going to other people. But again, this isn't usually a genre that I'm full on like, yeah, man, that's definitely my cup of tea. But Saw kind of gets me there more than, and maybe the only franchise that does that, which is really impressive. And there's no denying Leigh Whannell and James Wan, their influence, their impact on this franchise as a whole. But this movie specifically, I think works so well. So I'm going to throw the first Saw on the good tier, which again is lower than what a lot of people would put it on. But for me and this genre, it's really impressive. Austin, did James Wan direct a Fast and Furious film? Yeah, he did. And I'm not sure why they haven't brought him back, because genuinely, this is one of the Fast and Furious movies that resonates with me the most. And I'm not the biggest Fast and Furious fan, to be honest with you. I like some of the movies. I really enjoy Fast 5. I think Fast 6 is pretty... It's not called that. Furious 6? Fast and Furious 6? The 6 Fast 5s. No. But Furious 7 works for various reasons. I think the filmmaking, obviously one style, is there. I think the heart and emotions are present. And obviously they're present, with what happened with Paul Walker. But the way that they handle that, and just the impressive job that he did, bringing this movie home, doing it in a way that honored Paul Walker, but also delivering on some really fun action scenes. And this is when the franchise was over the top, but not to the point of distraction. So I'm going to put Furious 7 on the good tier, guys. I think this is a good movie. Well, we've come to The Conjuring, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So let's get this out of the way and throw it on the awesome tier, because you guys know I am constantly raving about this first movie. Now, the Conjuring franchise as a whole, I think the problem is you started on such a high that the other movies, they're just not lived up to the hype, right? And that's unfortunate, because I think this first movie did so much. I like some of them, but not on the level of the first movie. This combines everything I love about horror. You have the more general type scares. You have the scares that will work for pretty much every audience. I mean, they're going to scare the living daylights out of you, absolutely. But it's not super artistic, something like Hereditary that not every audience member is going to respond to, something like Malignant that is really cheesy and over the top, and some people, well, they're just not expecting that going in. What you're expecting going into a horror movie is The Conjuring, right? It's supernatural, it's simple, the premise is familiar, but at the same time, it's all about the execution here. And I think the execution with The Conjuring is some of the best I've ever seen. The camera movements, the way that the scares come about, the idea of this paranormal couple, Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, they are incredible in their roles. You get attached to the family. I think this is the best family that James Wan has tackled in his horror movies, because, again, he's done a lot, but I really resonated with a lot of these individuals, and I just think this movie's outstanding. I've talked about it before. Y'all know how much I love it, but I love it so much. And then The Conjuring 2, again, it doesn't surpass the first for me, but I'm actually over here defending Conjuring 2 more than I think a lot of people, so I'm going to put The Conjuring 2 on the great tier. I think this is genuinely a great movie. I believe this does everything the first movie does, just not quite as good. The scares are there, and it may actually be scarier than the first, technically, a little bit more creepy. You get the the moments of the kid in the chair where he's got the grandpa voice, or she has got the grandpa voice, the old man voice. You're in my house. It reminds me of my grandfather. That's not true. That would be terrifying. I would move out. He doesn't live with me. What am I saying? But I like the idea that they're going over to another country. The stakes are maybe a bit higher this time around because the visions that she's seeing of Patrick Wilson's character, you get your first look at the nun, which maybe wasn't the most necessary thing in the world, but it's still very, very freaky. And I just love the idea that this couple, they're going on various journeys and seeing various things. And this may even have a bit more heart when it comes to that main couple this time around. The family's good as well. I didn't love the story itself as much, and it does hit those lulls a bit more than the first. But overall, what a great horror movie this is. Absolutely. I think I like this movie more than some other people. I know everyone from I fell asleep during Aquaman to I wanted to walk out of the theater to Aquaman's a freaking blast, and so many people hold it in such high regard in the DC universe. I'm not there, right? It's clearly flawed, but I think Aquaman, honestly, and this is going to sound really weird, was a bit of a precursor to Malignant. What? I asked him, what do you say? Aquaman takes the superhero genre and cheesifies it. Is that a word? Did I just make that up? Probably. I mean, you got an octopus playing the drums. You got some scenes in there. The Pitbull Africa song playing when they're walking in the sand. It's a little off at times, right? But there's something about the magic of that and the idea of this movie being so bombastic and crazy at times. This big underwater war of all of these different factions of people. It's fun. It really is. And I kind of embraced that madness as I was watching. Here's what gets me, though. The action scenes between Aquaman and his foes. The idea of this man embracing his destiny. The interactions between he and others. I love the relationship with his father. I love Dafoe's presence. I love Patrick Wilson as our villain here. He's really good. The fight scene at the end. Some of the fight scenes here are magnificent. And Wan just said, I'm going to create the most ridiculous at times, but crazy superhero movie you've ever seen. But he's embracing what Aquaman is and was. I mean, everybody's always made fun of Aquaman, but nobody's going to make fun of Jason Momoa, let me tell you. But that cheese is there, absolutely. And I, for one, have a good time while watching this movie. And the charisma from Momoa mixed with Wan's direction. It's a little over the top, but I enjoy it. And that's why I'm putting Aquaman on the good tier. Now, Malignant. The movie that seems to be dividing audiences, and understandably so, right? You go into a James Wan horror film, you don't expect it to be this cheesy 80s throwback slasher movie. I expect paranormal. I expect Conjuring, Insidious, maybe Saw, but none of those movies have the level of cheese. And somebody asked me in the comments during my review, they said, Austin, what do you mean by cheesy? What do you mean by campy, right? Well, it truly embraces the tone that these classic 80s horror movies were so good at. Your Sam Raimi Evil Deads. And no, it's not as fun as Evil Dead. I'm not putting it in that category because clearly that movie, I think, does a bit of a better job. That's a classic for a reason. Malignant is why, and you know, and some people may disagree, but you know from the opening shot when that guy screams the way that he screams and you're getting these flashbacks throughout the movie, you know exactly what the tone is. And I know for a fact, Wan just embraced this from the beginning, and I'm sure he knows what he's doing here. The intentions are not for this movie to take itself too seriously. He meant to make it the tone that it was, because after clearly Wan doing all of these horror films prior, the guy has my permission. He doesn't need it, but he has my permission to do whatever he wants to do, and he said, I'm not going to do the supernatural right now. I'm going to take the campiness of what, you know, kind of sticks out to me from the past and apply it to this crazy movie and give us this slasher character. And again, I believe Gabriel, and I'm not going to spoil the movie in this video, but I believe Gabriel is going to go down as one of those cult classic slasher characters because of what he manages to do in this movie. The wild third act, the third act that goes bonkers. It goes for it in a way that we have never really seen in a film before. And again, I believe the issue here with this film is everybody is expecting this very serious, tonally dark, scary movie, and it gets dark, for sure. And that trailer told us this was going to be a very different film. I think that's kind of an issue with the marketing, but we'll get in that some other time. As of right now, Malignant, if you can embrace the kind of movie that it is and just have fun with it. And that's what I did, right? If you can't, I completely understand, because it is very over the top at times. Some people are going to watch this, man, and they're going to say, what on God's green earth am I watching? And, you know, they're going to come in my comment section like they did in my review, and they're going to say, you were paid. I didn't get a screener for this movie. I woke up at 3 a.m. to watch this, so I was very tired, but this woke me up really fast, really fast, and I said, I am so on board with what they're doing here. A little cheesy, and I even think some of the performances weren't the best. But I will say, the overall impact and our main performance, she's amazing. But that third act, I can't get over. It's really kind of an action movie. I was never scared. Here's the thing, though. I don't really get scared, right? Jump scares, they don't impact me like they do other people. So I like creepy. I like spooky and haunting. That's what I got. That's what this movie was. I'm going crazy. I'm putting this on the great tier. I don't care. Well, I care. I care about the movie, but I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. And here's the thing. Cheesy horror is not usually my genre. It takes something like The Evil Dead to get me like really into it. But I was really into this movie. What can I say? I already said it, too late. All right, guys, let's rank these films. Obviously, at the bottom, we have Dead Silence, followed by Insidious Chapter 2. I'm going to put Death Sentence just slightly above that movie. At the bottom of the good tier, we're going to keep Aquaman in that spot. And actually, that looks like a good order to me. Furious 7, Saw, on the great tier. I am going to keep Malignant at the bottom. So Malignant comes in at the 4 spot. Insidious at the 3 spot, just below the Conjuring 2. So clearly, I'm a Conjuring fan, because my number 1 and number 2 movies for James Wan are the Conjuring films. So obviously, when he lives in the supernatural, that's where I love him as a director. But when he goes outside of the box, I still thoroughly enjoy it. And according to this tier list, I just think he is a really good director with really no misfires. I mean, one that I'm like, meh about, but for the rest of the films, I always have fun when I go back and revisit them. So a very different tier list for me. I'm not usually doing the horror directors, but James Wan, how do you feel about him? 10 movies, I figured it was the perfect opportunity. Only doing the movies that he directed. Obviously, you guys the best. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you like this tier list and you want to see more director tier lists, I'm thinking about doing a Wes Anderson tier list in honor of The French Dispatch. You're the best. I'll see you soon.